What if I told you the last time Brazil faced Japan, they threw away a 2-0 lead and lost 3-2? Yes, you heard that right. For the first time in history, Japan defeated Brazil. Now they're about to meet again. But this time, it's not a friendly. It's the FIFA World Cup. Win, and you move one step closer to lifting football's biggest trophy. Lose, and you're on the flight home. Can Japan shock Brazil once again? Or will Carlo Ancelotti's Brazil finally prove why they are one of the favorites to win this World Cup? Let's break it all down. But before we begin, if you enjoy World Cup content, predictions, tactical analysis, and fantasy football videos, make sure to subscribe to Legends SR10. We are uploading throughout the World Cup, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's get into it. This is genuinely one of the most fascinating round of 32 ties in the entire tournament. On one side, you have got Brazil, five-time world champions, the most successful nation in football history, a country where football isn't just a sport, it's a part of the culture. But despite all that history, Brazil haven't lifted the World Cup since 2002. That's almost a quarter of a century ago. An entire generation of Brazilian fans has never seen their country become the world champions. That's why Carlo Ancelotti was brought in. Not to play beautiful football, not to entertain, but to bring the trophy back to Brazil. Standing in their way, Japan, a team that has quietly become one of the most respected football nations in Asia. Disciplined, organized, fearless, and most importantly, a team that already knows it can beat Brazil. And that's what makes this game even more interesting. Let's rewind to October 2025. Brazil were playing Japan in Tokyo. Inside the first half, everything looked normal. Brazil were cruising, they were leading 2-0. Everyone expected another comfortable Brazilian victory. Then, everything changed. Japan came out for the second half like a completely different team. They pressed higher, moved the ball quicker, started winning every second ball. Brazil completely lost control of the match. Japan scored once, then again. Then, with less than 20 minutes remaining, they completed the comeback. Japan 3, Brazil 2, history. For the first time ever, Japan had beaten Brazil. Not only that, Brazil suffered their first defeat against an Asian nation. That result completely shocked the football world. Now, here's the important part. That was a friendly. Brazil were experimenting. Ancelotti was still figuring out his strongest team. The defense looked completely different. Several key players weren't available. So while Japan completely, absolutely deserved that victory, this Brazilian team arriving at the World Cup is a different team. And honestly, this Brazilian side has surprised me. When Carlo Ancelotti took over, many people expected classical Brazilian football. Beautiful passing, samba football, constant attacking. Instead, he's built something much more balanced. This Brazilian team doesn't need 70% possession to dominate games. They're happy to defend, happy to stay compact, happy to let you have the ball because they know the moment they win it back, they've got players who can destroy you in a transition. And that's exactly what we have seen during this tournament. Brazil started with a frustrating 1-1 draw against Morocco, but since then they have looked like a completely different side. 3-0 against Haiti, 3-0 against Scotland, 2 clean sheet, 6 goals scored, just 1 goal conceded in the entire group stage. That's the kind of football Carlo Ancelotti loves. Not flashy, not risky, just efficient. And knockout football is often won by teams that know how to control games rather than simply dominate possession. But here's the thing, there's one massive question that still hasn't been answered. Have Brazil genuinely improved, or have they just simply not faced a team as dangerous as Japan yet? Because what Japan does better than almost anyone in this tournament could expose Brazil's biggest weakness. So let's talk about Japan, because I genuinely believe this is one of the most underrated teams left in the tournament. People often think of Japan as a hardworking side, a disciplined side, a team that fights for every ball. And yes, that's true, but this Japanese team is much more than that. They're one of the most tactically intelligent teams at this World Cup. Everything they do has a purpose. Their movement, their positioning, their pressing. Even the way they rotate players during possession, nothing is random. They usually operate in a back three with aggressive wingbacks, allowing them to create overloads out wide. Instead of relying on one superstar, Japan attack as a unit. One player drops into midfield, another immediately runs in behind. The wingback overlaps. The midfield fills the empty space. It's almost like watching a machine. Every player knows what exactly where they're supposed to be. And that's what they have caused problems for many teams. Just look at that tournament. Against the Netherlands, they came back from behind twice. That immediately showed their mentality. Then they completely dominated Tunisia. And finally, they secured a qualification with another disciplined performance against Sweden. They're unbeaten, confident, and they've already shown they can compete against elite opposition. That's why Brazil cannot afford to underestimate them. If I had to pick one thing Japan do better than almost anyone else, is the build-up play. They're incredibly comfortable playing through pressure. Instead of launching low balls, they patiently pass through the midfield, breaking one pressing line, then another. Then suddenly they're attacking your penalty area. Their midfielders are constantly offering passing options. Their movement of the ball is excellent. Players like Kamada, Tanaka, and Ueda are constantly rotating possessions. That makes them incredibly difficult to mark. However, Japan aren't perfect, and I think this is where Brazil can punish them. For all the beautiful football they play, they sometimes struggle with the final action. They create chances, but they don't always finish them. We have seen games where Japan dominate possession, dominate territory, but only score once. Against Brazil, you don't usually get 5 or 6 clear opportunities. You might get one or two, and if you don't take them, Brazil will. Now let's switch over to Brazil because Carlo Ancelotti deserves a lot of credit. This isn't the Brazil we are used to watching. This isn't the free flowing, all out attacking football of previous generations. Instead, it's a much more mature team. Brazil defend in a compact shape. They don't press rigorously. They don't leave huge spaces behind their defense. Instead, they wait, they stay patient, and the moment they recover possession, everything becomes incredibly direct. One pass, two passes, then suddenly Vinicius Jr. is sprinting at defenders in open space. That's exactly what Ancelotti wants. He doesn't want Brazil dominating possession, he wants Brazil dominating moments, and that's a huge difference. And that brings me to the most important player on the pitch, Vinicius Jr. In my opinion, he's been Brazil's best player this tournament. Everything goes through him. Every dangerous counter attack, every one versus one situation, every transition. Japan already know how dangerous he is, which means they're probably going to double team him. And here's the problem. If you send two defenders towards Vinicius, you're automatically creating space somewhere else. That could be Mateus Cunha, that could be Ryan, that could be Bruno Guimaraes arriving late into the box. So stopping Vinicius isn't as simple as marking Vinicius. The entire Brazilian attack benefits from the attention he attracts. But despite all of that, there's one tactical battle that I think decides this entire game. And if Brazil win that battle, I honestly don't see Japan surviving. So what's exactly going to decide this match? For me, it all comes down to one tactical battle. Japan's attacking wingbacks versus Brazil's counter attack. This is where the game will be won or lost. Japan love pushing their wingbacks high up the pitch. They want to stretch the opposition, create overloads, work the ball into dangerous crossing positions. It's one of their biggest strengths, but it can also become their biggest weakness because every single time those wingbacks go forward, they're leaving space behind them. And against most teams, you can recover. Against Brazil, you don't get that luxury because the moment Brazil wins the ball, they're gone. Vinicius, Ryan, Mateus Cunha, one forward pass, and suddenly Japan's back three are defending huge spaces against some of the fastest attackers in the world. That's exactly the situation Carlo Ancelotti wants to create. But I also think Brazil's midfield deserves a lot more credit. Everyone talks about Vinicius, everyone talks about Neymar, everyone talks about the attackers. But for me, the midfield is what makes this team work. Casemiro gives them experience, Bruno Guimaraes controls the tempo, Lucas Paqueta links the midfield with the attack. These three allow Brazil to stay compact without losing creativity. And that's incredibly important against a team like Japan. Because if Brazil lose control in midfield, Japan will dominate possession. But if Bruno and Paqueta can keep winning those second balls, Brazil will constantly launch dangerous transitions. And that's where I think the game slowly starts swinging towards Brazil. Another thing people aren't talking about enough, Brazil's bench. Imagine defending against Vinicius Jr. for 70 minutes and then Carlo Ancelotti brings on Endrick or Neymar or another fresh attacking player. That's terrifying. Japan have a very good squad, but Brazil simply have many more match winners. In knockout football, that's often the difference. Sometimes your starting 11 doesn't win you the game, your substitutes do, and I think Brazil have a real advantage over here. Now let's talk about something that statistics can't measure, pressure. Who actually has more pressure in this game? Most people will instantly say Brazil. And they are right. Brazil are expected to win. Anything less than victory would be considered a disaster. Japan, they have got nothing to lose. Nobody expects them to win. They are already exceeding expectations. That makes them dangerous. Because teams with nothing to lose usually play without fear. But here's why I don't think that psychological advantage will be enough. This isn't the same Brazil that collapsed in Tokyo. That defeat actually helped them. It exposed their weaknesses. It forced Carlo Ancelotti to make changes. It made Brazil more disciplined, more compact, more difficult to break down. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a great team is suffering one painful defeat before the tournament begins because it wakes everyone up. And I genuinely think that's what happened with Brazil. So if I'm picking one player from each team, for Brazil, it's obviously Vinicius Jr. He's the player Japan fear the most. He's already shown during this World Cup that one moment, one dribble, one run can completely change the game. If Vinicius plays at his best, Brazil usually win. Simple as that. For Japan, I'm actually going to pick Daichi Kamada, not because he'll score, but because he controls so much of Japan's attacking rhythm. If Brazil stop Kamada from finding space between the lines, Japan's entire attacking structure becomes much less dangerous. That's why this battle in midfield is so important. So, after looking at the tactics, the history, the form, the psychology, there's only one thing left: who's winning? And honestly, I think this game will surprise a lot of people. So, after looking at everything, the tactics, the recent history, the statistics, the lineups, the managers, the key players, here's my prediction: Brazil 3, Japan 0. Now, before anyone starts calling me crazy in the comments, let me explain. Do I think Japan are a bad team? Absolutely not. In fact, they are one of the best coach teams in the entire tournament. They're disciplined, they're technically brilliant, they move the ball well, and they absolutely deserve to be in the knockout stage. But tournament football is all about matchups. And unfortunately for Japan, I think Brazil are probably the worst possible matchup they could have received. Japan want possession, Brazil are happy to let them have it. Japan commit plays forward, Brazil thrive in transition. Japan's wingbacks push high, Brazil has some of the fastest attackers in world football. Everything that makes Japan dangerous also creates opportunities for Brazil. And that's why I think Carlo Ancelotti's game plan will work perfectly. The biggest reason I'm backing a clean sheet in Brazil's defensive improvement. Remember the Brazil that collapsed against Japan in that friendly? This isn't that team anymore. The defensive shape is much more organized. The midfield protects the back four much better. They're making the far fewer individual mistakes. And Alisson is one of the best keepers in the world. Yes, Japan will probably enjoy spells of possession. There will be moments where Brazil have to defend, but I don't think Japan create enough clear-cut chances to beat this Brazilian defense. That's been my one concern with Japan throughout this tournament. They play excellent football, but against elite opposition, you have to be ruthless. And I don't think they'll be ruthless enough. On the other hand, I think Brazil's attack is only getting stronger. Vinicius Jr. is growing into this tournament with every game. Mateus Cunha has looked much more comfortable in this system. Bruno Guimaraes is controlling games brilliantly. Lucas Paqueta keeps finding dangerous spaces. And if the game opens up in the second half, Brazil have incredible options from the bench. That's why I can actually see Brazil becoming stronger as the match goes on. I think the first half will be tight, very tactical, very cagey. Maybe Brazil lead 1-0 at halftime. But once Japan are forced to push higher looking for an equalizer, that's when the spaces appear. And once Brazil get that second goal, I think the game is over. Japan will have to take more risks. Brazil will push them again. That's why I'm going with a 3-0 win. If Brazil win this game convincingly, I honestly think that will send a message to the rest of the tournament, because this won't just be another victory. It'll be proof that this Brazilian side can be a genuinely good team in the knockout rounds. And once confidence start building, Brazil can become a very scary team to face. For Japan, regardless of the result, they have earned a lot of respect. They have shown once again that they are one of the strongest footballing nations in Asia. And I genuinely believe it's only a matter of time before we see Japan make a deep run in the World Cup. Maybe not this year, but it's coming. So that's my prediction: Brazil 3, Japan 0. Now it's your turn. Let me know your predictions down in the comments. Who goes through? Who's your man of the match? And who do you think Japan can shock Brazil again? Or is this finally Brazil's statement performance? Before I wrap up, I have got one more blockbuster preview for you. I think Brazil versus Japan is the biggest round of 32 clash. Wait until you hear Netherlands versus Morocco. It's another heavyweight matchup that could easily pass as a quarterfinal. And I've broken down the tactics, key battles, and my full prediction in a separate video. The link is waiting for you in the pinned comment down below. Make sure you check it out after this one. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to smash that like button, share the video with your football friends, and subscribe to Legends SR10 for more World Cup previews, predictions, and tactical analysis, fantasy football content, and post-match reactions throughout the tournament. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.